Well, hello again, and welcome into another episode of Interrupting Racism. My name is Brian Prowitz, and I'm the host and creator of this streamcast that can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, and now on Twitch, with the idea of sharing information and opinion and expertise from leaders around the state of Oregon, just trying to push out some positive stuff in a world that seems to have gone completely crazy in some ways. And we thank you for being here. Interrupting Racism comes on the air sort of at a little bit randomly, but we aren't too worried about when we go live. The point is that these videos can exist on YouTube and Facebook and now Twitch in a way where we hope that a lot of people get to see them, and we hope that you share these with your friends. And we know that people are watching today, and we expect to hear some comments from you, which we can see on the screen and we'll react to today as well here on Interrupting Racism. This is episode 13, and we are welcoming to episode 13, which I don't know if he is, I don't know, Ed, if you are superstitious or not, but you're episode 13. But to the screen, we welcome Ed Madison, Associate Professor in the School of Journalism and Communication at the University of Oregon. That's one of Ed's titles. He's got several, including he was my buddy in class 34 of ALF, and so we share a special bond that goes back a little bit further than some of the other folks that we've had on the program. So hello, buddy.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for having me on. I'm really honored to participate.
Well, you and I actually talked about something like this back when we were in ALF. We talked about a podcast of some sort, and then this streamcasting opportunity has come along, and it's been incredibly satisfying to me. It's been able to allow me to like scratch an itch to just, I don't know, show off some of the people that I've become friends with, and as my network has expanded. And you watched that actually take place in real time a few years ago, and so this is really fun. It feels full circle for me today.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you've got a following here that knows what ALF is, but I'm wondering if we need to clarify or.
We clarify quite a bit, but ALF is the American Leadership Forum of Oregon. There are, I would say, programs throughout the country, but the ALF program in Portland essentially is for the state of Oregon. And as I describe it to people, I say that ALF brings cohorts of about 20 people together from various backgrounds, rural and urban, different political, certainly opinions in the group, but also people of color and of various orientations, just as a way to understand one another better. It's a year-long program, and you start off with a week all together, no phones, kind of intense. And then it's a year of traveling around the state of Oregon. And not only do you get an education in the leaders around the state of Oregon, but you also get a tour of the state. You get to see the history in those places while you discuss some of the very important issues that exist in the day. So would you add anything to that?
No, that's a great description. Yeah.
I've run through that elevator pitch a few times. Now, Ed, why don't you give us just a little bit of background? I introduced you as, associate professor at University of Oregon in the School of Journalism, but talk about your formative years, where you're from, and how you got to where you are sitting right now in less than 30 minutes, because it could potentially take that long.
It could take that long. I'll try to give the short version. So I always start my story with my parents and actually my mom and dad. So my dad was a trailblazing journalist. He was the first African-American to join the editorial staff of the Chicago Tribune back in 1961. So he covered the civil rights movement. He covered the Kennedy-Nixon debates, I learned later in life. He knew Dr. King, and he was on the front line of history as it was unfolding. And my mom taught elementary school, and we moved to Washington, D.C. around the time I was 6 or 7 years old. And so I bared eyewitness to the unfolding of everything. I can remember my dad waking me up and telling me that Robert Kennedy had been assassinated, and certainly Dr. King before that. So it was an amazing time and place. And that's sort of been what's occurred for me throughout my career. I started in the industry myself at age 16 as an intern at the CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C., which was owned by the Washington Post at the time and was during the height of the Watergate scandal. So again, another sort of front row seat to everything that was unfolding. I did my undergraduate studies at Emerson College in Boston, which is very well known for communications and media, and then immediately moved out to Los Angeles. And my first job, which a lot of people certainly don't associate with journalism, but I did cue cards for the Mike Douglas show. And that was an incredible experience. I mean, you name them, Liberace, Bob Hope, that whole group of people that were famous during that period of time, including Natalie Wood, who, it was literally 6 feet in front of me, about a couple of years before she unfortunately passed. And then a woman who I had interned for while I was in Boston at Channel 5 in Boston called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm starting as a new features, head of features for this new network called CNN." Nobody had heard of CNN or Ted Turner or what any of that was. And I basically was hired on the team that launched CNN out of the Los Angeles bureau. I was in charge of an hour of entertainment news, sort of an entertainment news talk show. As a matter of fact, we kind of invented the whole idea of red carpet interviews. This is pre-E-Entertainment, pre-Entertainment Tonight. We were on the red carpet with a hand out, talking to celebrities as they were coming into premieres and parties and things like that. It was an incredible, incredible experience. And then I went to work for the CBS morning program during the time that Mariette Hartley was the co-host. It was one of the many failed attempts to compete with the Today Show, but it was an incredible experience. I got to go to Japan and cover the opening night of Michael Jackson's Bad tour, tour with Duran Duran, interview Tina Turner, Elton John, just amazing, amazing experiences. And then, so I was in LA for about 23, 24 years. I actually had my own production company. We did what we call electronic press kits, which are kind of the making of or behind the scenes of motion pictures that you often see on HBO or in other places. And the work that I did was for Star Trek VI and Bill and Ted and a number of Eddie Murphy movies. And it was a really good experience. And then I think maybe because I had started in Los Angeles at such a young age, like right out of college, things were becoming more tabloid oriented in terms of television, and it was not really aligned with my own sense of what I wanted to be doing. I was not interested in working for shows like Hard Copy or Inside Edition or Current Affair or any of those shows that were kind of becoming popular during that time. And so I was producing a show for A&E Network called A&E Top 10, and it was a pop culture countdown series where every week we would have a top 10 list. So we did top 10 exotic destinations, top 10 celebrity chefs. Matter of fact, we did one of the last interviews with Julia Child, and we had Emeril Lagasse, and all the chefs that you would know. And one of our shows was on college towns, top 10 college towns, and number 7 on our list was Eugene, Oregon. And I had heard a lot about Eugene. It never been before. I'd heard it was kind of like Berkeley, and kind of had a Paisley, hippie reputation and whatever else. But anyway, I came to Eugene and basically fell in love with my own story. And a year and a half decided to move to Eugene. I think it's because I'd grown up in Washington, D.C. with basically somewhat of a mild climate and Rock Creek Park throughout the entire town is why Eugene appealed to me. But also, I think I was just ready for a different change in life. I throw kayaks on my rooftop, and I make wine as a hobby, and I do all kinds of things that I would never have done in Los Angeles. And so that informs what I do. And then to finalize the story here in terms of how the U of O comes into it is that around 2008, as the economy was making a downturn, I had a production company with offices in Portland and about 6 or 7 employees, and the economy was tanking. And I just decided it was time to do something else. And so I started teaching at Oregon State University part-time, and then was offered an opportunity to teach just a workshop class at U of O. And then someone said, you might want to pursue getting an advanced degree. Have you ever thought about that? And I didn't know that you actually, that they actually pay you. I mean, there's fellowships where you get paid to earn an advanced degree. And so I entered the program at U of O, finished with my Ph.D. in 2012, was hired the next year, and I received tenure just a year and a half ago. So that kind of brings us full circle. And the work that I do, which the journalistic work that I do, is really informed by my dissertation project. I stumbled upon this program at Palo Alto High School. That's probably the largest high school journalism program in the country. Some 750 students, almost a third of the student body are engaged in various aspects of journalism. And of course, it's in one of the most affluent zip codes in America, across the street from Stanford. Google is around one corner, Facebook's around the other corner. And I was really interested in finding out whether or not the outstanding and poised and professional students I was meeting there were just because of affluence, or was there something that they were doing that could inform programs in schools and communities far less affluent? So I gave you a very, very long answer, and but that's kind of what gets me to this point where we are right now.
Yeah, well, talk to me about tell me now where you're at as far as that question about youth and their ability with media. I mean, you are very, very involved in a big project involving, and it's probably more than one, actually, bringing youth together with media and really teaching them how to speak, right? I mean, are you encouraging their voice and everything, right?
Yeah. So it turns out that the practices that journalists probably take for granted are the exact skills that young people need to navigate in an ever-changing, unpredictable, uncertain world that we live in. So collaboration skills, learning to work together, learning to develop ideas and pitch them. So in other words, how to speak persuasively, how to raise money, how to get things funded, how to advocate, I guess, is really the sort of all-encompassing term. How to advocate for your ideas, how to write for an audience, how to write in a manner that is concise, and that people, how to basically consolidate information in a way that people can interpret it and make sense of it. That's what journalists do. And so we have three fundamental programs that we do. One, which I'm excited to announce, and it's just beginning to come out, but we have a partnership with BuyMart, where we are going to be able to expand our program into 20 communities, rural communities across Oregon. And what we're offering is a program that we call Effective Communicators. It's designed for middle and high school students, and it will be part of their regular curriculum. And it builds on something that we've been basically doing for 5 years. The only difference is that what we used to do is we used to send one of our staff people to work alongside a teacher, and now because of Zoom and video conferencing and things like that, we can train teachers remotely. But that's our signature program that everyone will be hearing a lot more about. It's called Effective Communicators, and at the heart of it, it's about learning to communicate effectively, whether that be verbal skills or writing skills or conversation skills, how to research information. The second program is something called the Student Voice, and that's in partnership with the University of Oregon. And every Friday from noon until 1 p.m., we have what we call a virtual newsroom, where we engage with middle and high school students and their advisors from across the country. And this has been going on for about 10 weeks. It is, we've had students and folks from Boston and New York and Colorado, and it's a growing community, and we're very excited about that. And we're also going to be doing a Student Voice Awards in May, and then there's a Student Voice publication. So if you were to go to the net, you would see these. It's basically articles from students from all over. And if you think about it, Brian, I mean, this particular young generation is being faced with so many issues. I don't even know if there's ever been a time when there's been so much. I mean, when you think about, a pandemic, climate science, wherever you are on the belief about, just the origins of what's happening with the severe weather that we're experiencing even now in Texas, gun violence, depression and anxiety. We know that teenagers right now, some of it COVID related, but even before that, the numbers were through the roof in terms of what these kids are confronting and dealing with. And yet we don't hear their voices, and so this project is about elevating those voices and not only having a place where they can be read by their peers, but also encouraging mainstream media organizations to pick up the stories that these young people are writing. So that's the second project. And then the third project, which just arrived on my doorstep today. So if you're listening, you can't see this, but if you're watching, Black Student Magazine is a project that we got some funds from the state of Oregon, and also the Oregon Cultural Trust and the Autzen Foundation and several businesses, including Umpqua Bank and just lots of corporate sponsors. And so it is Black History Month, but also just ongoingly, we know that when students are involved in publication projects, their grades improve, they develop stronger writing skills, stronger critical thinking skills. And so we worked with a team of students over the past 11 weeks to create this magazine, Black Student Magazine, and it's really cool. It's really cool. So that's our three projects. And
you're very proud of that. I know how proud you are of that magazine.
Yeah. We're going to take that to other cities. I mean, it's this was just really kind of a pilot offering here, but we're going to enlarge that program.
Now, does everything you talked about fall under the Journalistic Learning Initiative?
Yes.
Okay. So I was going to show this. I want people to head to journalisticlearning.com as well, and you could see all the information or more information about those projects and programs that Ed is talking about. How does working with these students and helping them have a voice tie back full circle to where you started when you were describing your father and your parents and your background and civil rights and the issues that we always talk about when it comes to some of the challenges we have right now in the United States? How does that all tie together for you when you're with students?
Yeah, so I'll share some stories. First of all, by all ways of looking at it, I definitely would say that I had a privileged upbringing. My parents, we weren't wealthy, but we were upper middle class. My parents were both professionals. They both had master's degrees. They worked really hard, but they also came from humble beginnings. My dad tells a story of going for his first job interview and someone asking him for a resume and him not knowing what that was. And once he found out what a resume was and how commonplace it was, he was so ashamed that he said no child of his will ever have that experience. Well, guess who had a resume practically at 12? Yeah. But the other thing to know is, so my family's from Oklahoma, and there's something that's in the history books called the Tulsa riots that happened in the 20s, and it's a very sad stain on American history. But there was a race riot in Tulsa. And my parents weren't alive yet, but my grandfather, if you look at some of the documentary footage, you can see this. But the interesting thing about this history of Tulsa is that there was just people talk about residual income or residual financial benefits. Oklahoma at the time was as oil wealthy, if not rivaled Texas, and so there was a lot of money that trickled into all communities, including the Black community. And so in Tulsa, there was an area that is now often referred to as the Black Wall Street. There were businesses that were thriving, and it was there was a line you didn't cross. I mean, definitely it was segregated. But these businesses thrived, and consequently, some of the African Americans there were some of the first to go to pretty established universities like Cornell and places like that. When they would come back, highly educated, they found that there were not jobs for them in academia, and so they ended up teaching at high schools. And so I say all that to say that my father had an education in high school that was equivalent to a college education. I always sort of took for granted, and my dad was very, very smart guy who could recite Shakespeare. I just thought everybody was like that. I didn't realize that it was because of this economic condition in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that allowed for a level of affluence, if you will, that wasn't commonplace. So those things kind of inform who I am, and I think that I just maybe took for granted when I was growing up. I mean, being able to, I was at 16 with a big afro, interning on a television show at the height of the sort of pop psychology movement and the self-help movement, all those things, and I would read all these books, and I definitely went through life believing that, as my father said, if you put your mind to it, you can make it happen. And I took that for granted. And later in life, I kind of realized, well, wait a minute. There are a lot of people from all different backgrounds and persuasions who don't have a stable home, who don't have successful parents, who are concerned about where their next meal may come from. And so I feel in many ways I'm somewhat obligated, not because of any guilt or any reason like that, but just I've had a good life, and the background that I've had that's based in journalism and inquiry and all that stuff has informed that.
So how does all of that experience then funnel down into the students that you're working with? What is it about that then motivates you to reach to our youth and share your experience with them?
Well, I'm going to share something with you that really hits a nerve here. So, and I don't tell this that often, but I didn't go to the continent of Africa until I was well into my 40s, like maybe mid 40s. Okay. Understandably, I was raised to want to go and see Paris and Rome and all those places, and I saw those places, but Africa was not high on my list. And why? Because what you're taught in schools about Africa is genocide, AIDS, not a place you would want to go, corruption, all those things, right? When I did first go to Africa on a documentary project, I was so struck by the richness, and when I say richness, I don't mean economic richness. I'm talking about just the heartfelt richness of the culture, the people. I was moved to tears. I mean, I just was walking around like, oh my God, because I could not believe that it had taken me this long, and I had all this internalized kind of shame, I think, associated with it. And so people ask me if I live in a tiny house. No, this is a little writing sort of studio that I had built in my backyard. And I have this photograph over my shoulder of a picture I took on my first trip. Let's see if I can get this right here to Ghana.
Here you go.
You see that there? Yeah,
I do that again. I need to take my camera there.
Yeah, so that kid there, and he keeps me honest because you know, I think that all of us, no matter what we look like or what our racial background is or anything else, if we've had it good, I think we're obligated to give and contribute to others. And so my vision of what we're doing stretches far beyond you know, both of our coasts. You know, we have a global vision for what the work that we want to do. We actually have already done some work, some projects in Africa, and intend to do more. And so, yeah, it just kind of guides me.
Well, it sounds like you can see yourself in a lot of the students, I think, too, as you see them. But boy, back to that point you made about all the different things that the way they can see things, or the issues that are in front of our students. And I talked to Libra Ford here on a recent edition of Interrupting Racism. We were talking about how kids are sort of processing everything going on. And when I say kids, I'm talking for her, I'm talking more, you know, smaller kids. You're mostly working with middle and high schoolers, if I remember correctly. So, but still, to give them the ability to convey the way they see the world with all these issues going on and the things that are around them, it's so powerful. And so I think it's very exciting to give them that ability.
Yeah, and I actually would say that they have that ability already. And to some degree, our system of schooling may start to rob them of that ability. So I'm always careful to say that I'm not saying anything that's bashing teachers, because I think teachers they're hardworking, they're dedicated, they're underpaid, and there are a lot of demands placed on them. So this is not about teachers being at fault. But we have some policies that are left over that focus on standardized testing, and that equate just school success with test scores and things like that. And we know, for example, that there are the arts, which is important to having a balanced education, and music and things like that have in many cases have been diminished in schools. And so you can see it with sixth graders. Some of the work we do is with students as young as sixth grade. There's still that innocence, that sort of bright-eyed, enthusiasm. And then you meet these kids maybe 2 or 3 years later, and all of a sudden, collars turned up, little mousse in the hair, makeup, attitude, and also, and I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon here, but social media. I think I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years there's some class action suit against Snapchat, because for the past, it snuck up on in our family. I didn't realize kids were thinking that they could say and do anything and thought it would disappear, and so they did say and do anything. In many cases, it came back to haunt them, and so that just this kind of unfettered access to speaking without any sense of decorum or respectful exchange is a problem, and yeah, so
yeah, well, I mean, so that's really important. I mean, there's a key word here that I keep skipping over that is the sort of the fulcrum of this, which is the word journalism.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can teach a lot of people how to shoot and edit video.
Right.
And you can teach people how to talk into a microphone and do their YouTube channel.
Right.
But journalism is an art and a science, and
yes.
There's a lot to it that
yes.
Is another thing to learn. And so you get a lot of, I remember when I began my broadcasting career, the concept was, just get on the air and go say something. And there's so much more to the preparation and what are you going to say and who you're speaking to and the responsibility of that. I mean, and also you have to learn what journalism is before you can go out and just break all the rules.
Right.
So talk about how important journalism is. In fact, this would be an opportunity for you also to possibly promote your book.
Yeah, well, maybe. It's funny. I mean, when I've spoken in public or whatever in the last 3 or 4 years, of course, you can imagine the first question that comes up is like, well, what about fake news? And that's a term I don't certainly don't embrace and don't even think makes sense, because if it's news, then it's not fake, So that being said, I do think that the journalism profession bears some responsibility for the fact that there is a lot of distrust. I think that perhaps, I don't think I personally, but I think that CNN, which is an organization I haven't been a part of in a very long time, I actually wonder, like, what do they do now? Because the last 3.5 years has kind of been branded as the anti-Trump network. I mean, every night, can you believe what he did today is basically kind of the narrative. And I somewhat understand what that was about, but I think it does beg the question of what do you do next? I think that was a symptom of a journalism profession that really had never seen anything like we encountered over the last 4 years, where facts, like things like how many people attended a event or something like that, where you could actually look and see and compare. When people would say, it's like saying orange and say, no, that's green, but it's orange. No, that's green. It's like, what do you do with that? That kind of, we hadn't seen anything like that before. So I think that's what prompted sort of this adversarial, and there's always been an adversarial relationship between the press and politicians. I mean, we remember Agnew and just all Nixon and all the other examples of when there's even Obama had sorry, my dogs are you going in or out? Go out. Okay. Had an adversarial relationship with the press. But there was a question in there somewhere, and I think I may have lost what you asked.
Well, just talking about journalism and how important it is that our young people understand that there is a thing called journalism and some of the responsibility that comes with that.
Yes, absolutely. And for the most part, people don't know this. So you and I know this because we've been around a little while. But I would ask, like, even your listeners, when I ask my students, when I say to them, who owns the airwaves? The response is Comcast, advertisers,
Dish Network.
Yeah, Dish Network. What people don't know is that, of course, we now moved from satellite to internet and all that stuff, but the airwaves themselves are owned by the people. That they are entrusted. The Federal Communications Commission still grants licenses to corporations to be stewards of the airwaves. And if, at least prior to one point in history, if you were not a good steward, you could lose your license, and some companies did. Most people don't have any concept that this is it's their airwaves, and so there's a whole shift that's happened. You're younger than I am, but you can, there was a time when you wouldn't imagine wearing a corporation's logo on your clothes that you pay for, like Nike or whatever it might be. And now that's very commonplace. And I think, I'm not anti-consumerism or anything like that, but I do think, I guess what I'm really trying to say here is I think that the public's sense of how much power they actually have is not as it should be. People have a lot of power. You can get just emails or complaints will get people's attention right away, especially in this era of social media. So.
the book I was referring to is Reimagining Journalism in a Post-Truth World. And I remember this came out right about, I think, right at the end of our ALF year, I think. I remember how excited you were about that coming out. How late night comedians, internet trolls, and savvy reporters are transforming news. What's a description of this book?
Ben DeJournette, who's an extremely talented writer, and I did this book together, and I don't think I would have even thought about trying to tackle such a challenging topic without someone of his level of skill. We wrote it together. When we started the book, no one knew what the outcome of the 2016 election was going to be, and then as it became apparent that the outcome was going to be what it was, we had to shift and pivot a bit. And actually, there's a picture of Donald Trump on the cover of the book. It is not an ideological book. It doesn't take any sides or anything like that. It really kind of grapples with this whole question of, what does journalism do in the situation that we kind of just were talking about, where there's just sort of a denial of many scientifically proven facts, so that's kind of what the book was about, and I'm proud of it. It was an appropriate piece to write at that particular time.
So what, kind of tying this back around to ALF and some of the social justice stuff that we see, and diversity, equity, and inclusion type stuff, what's on your mind right now with society and some of the things that people are talking about?
So I'm working on a project, an independent project with a number of UO alums and current students that we're calling Public Plea, and it's designed to be a podcast and a documentary. We haven't solidified who our partner, and we kind of have a pretty good sense of who our partner is going to be, but I don't want to say that until that's a done situation. But it focuses on Measure 11 in Oregon. So many people have heard of Measure 11, but they don't necessarily know the fine specifics of it. Measure 11 is legislation that's been around since 1994. That and up until recently, because what our project deals with is the juvenile side of this. It allowed for minors to be charged with minimum sentences for a list of some 27 crimes, and I'm talking about really harsh, 10, 20-year sentences for crimes it's a question as to whether or not it's the appropriate measure. Anyway, we've interviewed about 15, 16 people, including the architect, the person who wrote the legislation, including Joshua Marquez, who's a former prosecutor in Clatsop County, who's a interesting advocate for the death penalty and harsh sentencing, but also certainly criminal reform attorneys. And our story really focuses on three young men who are down in Grants Pass at the Rogue facility there. They're African American. They've been incarcerated since they were in their mid-teens. And as I was saying, there's been a reform of legislation as it reflects minors. So these harsh sentences, that whole policy of doing that is pretty much gone away, but it's not retroactive. So there are a number of people who are in the system who potentially could age out at 23, I believe it is. It's either 23 or 25, and find themselves in adult prison after spending many, many years of rehabilitating, being rehabilitated. So I'm interested in that topic, and I'm learning a lot about it. That's a project that's upcoming.
One of the stops that we had in our ALF class was at McLaren Youth
Yes.
Authority in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
And we met young men that were affected by Measure 11. And that's one of those that sticks with you when you meet some people that look, and they were in that situation where you talk to them and you get a sense that they've learned a lot. And if there was a positive outcome that they were headed toward because of the rehabilitation process that they were in at McLaren, which is not the general population, it was going to be lost if they were just dropped into the general population of the Oregon Corrections Department. And it seemed, I just remember at the time thinking that I felt pretty bad about that. It definitely affected some of my opinion about some of those laws.
Right.
And I'm sure that those stories are probably much the same, or what you're talking about with this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So does that tie for you then into the entire discussion about how many African Americans we have in the incarceration, in our jail system, in our prison system in the United States? I mean, I hear a lot about that. The question I asked you is, tell me about how, where you're at with some of the social justice issues that we talk about. I hear about the incarceration rate a lot. Is this a way that you are sharing more information about it because it's close to your heart?
So what I'm learning is, and to some degree, it's not too surprising. There's a cycle here, a cycle that continues, generation after generation. And so why is that? So one of the experts that we talked to in this podcast documentary project is a professor at University of Oregon, Rhonda Neese, whose expertise is around school disciplinary practices. So we know statistically nationwide that young people of color are disciplined more frequently and harshly than their peers. Now, you could easily say, well, they're acting out, or they're, like there's a reason for that, but there's things like implicit bias and things that people don't realize, sometimes blind spots that we have that have us maybe presume that Johnny is the culprit here in what happened or whatever else. But the real bottom line is that when students have a history of referrals to the principal, meaning they're sent down to the office, or they're put, in detention, or they're told to sit in the hallway or whatever else, it sends a message that you don't belong. And of course, you can't have kids disrupting learning for other kids. I'm not suggesting that, but there is something, there's potentially some alternative ways that would not send that message. And so, here's another thing and I think everybody can relate to this. You're in school and it's 4th grade and 3rd grade and 5th grade and it's all fine. And then all of a sudden you start to realize, well, wait a minute, Johnny's in a better reading group, or Sarah is getting pulled out for this or whatever. And maybe I just can't write, or maybe I'm bad at math. I think most students have some frame of this list of things that you think you do well, and things that you think you are not competent at, and there's a joke about how many journalists does it take to, just journalists are historically not so great at math. But when you start to have these inklings of a belief, then you start to gather evidence that solidifies that belief. And for many kids, particularly kids that are disciplined at high, and just on a regular basis, in ways that are disproportionate to their peers, it sends the message that you don't belong, and that is what has kids, I think, find themselves into trouble. I think the other thing that I'm starting to learn, I have so much respect for the Boys and Girls Clubs, which I'm learning more about, which provide an outlet for kids in that very critical time between 3 and 5 o'clock, where kids can sometimes find themselves astray into things that aren't in their best interest, as opposed to having a place to go. So, I think the whole notion of a school to prison pipeline starts in schools and looking at how we address issues of discipline and also giving kids outlets for things to do that are constructive. So that's kind of my thought about it.
Mm-hmm. And the project's called The Public Plea?
It's called Public Plea, and I don't think it's just called Public Plea, and we actually will have a website up. I don't think I'll look. I don't think it's up.
This is breaking news. It's developing. it's the sneak peek. It's the red carpet interview. Of
I don't think we have it. We don't have it up yet, but there'll be, and we're also going to be doing. So we just funded this out of our back pockets, So we're actually going to do a GoFundMe to take care of covering some of our hard costs, because there are camera rentals and we've had to a couple motel bills and things like that for things that we're doing. But that's not up yet. But if you look for it, maybe in 3 to 4 weeks, I think.
Yep.
We will have something up.
Well, I love all the projects that you're part of. I mean, you are really working in the lives of a lot of young people with what you're doing, and I'm sure you get a lot of pride out of that and satisfaction out of that too. And so, a tip of the cap to you for all that work that you're doing there.
It's exhausting.
I mean,
it's exhausting when I even think about it.
You travel the world with these kids sometimes too, right? Prior to COVID, you were traveling the world.
That is one of the great. I've taken students. So a couple of colleagues of mine, Lisa Hayamoto and Eric Boggs, and I, every 2 years we do a trip where we take about 18 journalism students from the University of Oregon someplace. And so we've gone to Cuba and Sri Lanka, and we were in New Zealand winter before this past, so we just last winter, so right before COVID kind of hit, we were able to get out. And I've also taken students to Vietnam, and it's great because it really trains young people to think on their feet and to encounter situations that are unpredictable and to be prepared. And so it's very, very rewarding work.
Mm-hmm. Terrific, my friend. Well, it's really good to see it. I usually also close out by giving the guest on Interrupting Racism sort of a carte blanche. Is there a thing that you just want to kind of feed back out there into the world? I mentioned at the beginning that being able to do this for me is to show the amazing leadership that we have around the state, people in leadership positions with very strong opinions or experiences around things that I haven't experienced. And oftentimes, so I kind of get to push that out there. If you knew that literally dozens of people were watching this right now, what message would Ed Madison want to make sure it gets back out there into the world?
Yeah, I think the message is that when we allow ourselves time to really sit and talk to others who may have a different experience or different background than ourselves, we start to discover that we have more in common than we might think. And I think that a lot of the strife and struggle and just unfortunate divisiveness that we've had in our country in the last it goes back further than 4 or 5 years, is unfortunately it's just a factor of not listening and not sharing and not talking with people outside of our own bubble. It's so easy for me to just tune into the media outlets that present ideas that I already agree with, and to hold those as the truth. And so I flip around. I look and listen to a lot of different things because I want to understand, other perspectives that are different than my own. And I think if we engage with one another respectfully and are willing to learn and are not rigid in our thinking, I think we will have a better shared existence.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and you and I got to live that in ALF.
Yeah.
If you missed it at the beginning, Ed was my buddy in ALF class 34, and you were, I guess, you were the first example of that for me. And since that's over now, ALF, our class is over, I have just tried to stay right in that mode. And in getting to know you a little bit, the perceptions that I had intrinsically built into my brain didn't follow the man that I had gotten to know, and it was life-changing for me. And so whenever I talk about these things here, or I'm what I mean is when I'm on Interrupting Racism, or I'm talking about some of these big issues, or when I go on my own Facebook page and start talking about some things, and I'm talking about this idea of leading from the middle and loving the person in front of you and turning off the news and trying to relate to one another and to throw away perceptions, as you might think a label should then come with a set of perceptions. All those things, they all started with the relationship that you and I had and have in ALF. And this literally has been the most rewarding 4 or 5 year period of my entire life, with what you just said in action. And so I think I'm an example of that thinking, and I'm thankful for that. It's been great. And so anyway, I endorse what you said.
Thank you.
I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Any final thoughts, my friend? I'm going to sell some T-shirts and send people to your website and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. No, not that come to mind. No, I think we covered a lot of ground, and I'm just again honored to be here with you. And it's interesting. It looks like there's a bumper sticker on my thing there. That's it. Your logo.
Yeah, that's the logo, which is so fancy because all that is just a picture of me in this shirt, and then I just cut it out and cropped it, and it's become our logo. And again, it's just sweeping the nation in popularity. I need a designer apparently, but want to remind people you can go to journalisticlearning.com to learn more about the JLI, Journalistic Learning Initiative, that Ed is heading up. You can also check out the studentvoice.net if you want to learn more about that particular program within the Journalistic Learning Initiative. We've been talking a lot about ALF, and you can learn more at alforegon.org. And also we are selling shirts. In fact, Ed, I'm going to send you a shirt from speakupwithus.com. The proceeds of which, when you go to speakupwithus.com and buy a T-shirt, the proceeds go to the Black United Fund of Portland, as we try to engage people and create some conversations, and then also help support an organization in the Portland area that helps reach communities of color throughout the state of Oregon. So those are all the things that I always like to do. And Lisa Watson is jumping in for some comments here. She wanted to say thank you, and what a conversation. Lisa, the executive director of ALF, and so we're proud to partner with them and hope that more people will check out what's happening. So hopefully the folks on Twitch, we connected up with them for the first time today. We have a Twitch account, Ed. That's also the landmark moment that you're a part of today, which I know you're just really excited about that for sure. But also the Interrupting Racism Streamcast on Facebook, Interrupting Racism on YouTube are our channels. And we will be back at it again very, very soon with another interview. And so, Ed, stand by. We will I'll come back to you here in just a half a second before you sign off. So once again, thank you for joining us today on Interrupting Racism. We'll be back again with another episode soon. But please go back and watch some of the earlier programs and check out the people that I've had a chance to talk to. And hopefully these stories and these conversations can get shared to more and more people. And we can see what we can do together from very different points of view in different places in the state of Oregon to do what we can to interrupt racism. Thank you for being with us today. We'll talk to you very soon.